Welcome to our fourth segment of our series, Mass Mashup.
Recently, we interviewed Father Dave about the Liturgy of the Word.
Roll that clip.
Hello, today we're here with Father Dave to talk about the Liturgy of the Word.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So good. So Liturgy of the Word. We did the introductory rites already.
Yes.
So now, after that, the Mass has two really main parts.
Yeah.
One's called Liturgy of the Word, one's called Liturgy of the Eucharist. So let's talk about Liturgy of the Word. Do you notice that we take Bible passages from?
Yes.
And we kind of, okay, so I just want to talk about how the Church chooses the passages. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's in the Bible, from a Christian standpoint, we have an Old Testament and a New Testament. And in the New Testament, there are 4 Gospels and then some other readings. So what the Church did is takes the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, and went through all the main passages and put that on a 3-year cycle, so that over 3 years of Sundays, if you went to every Mass on a Sunday, you would hear every major passage of every Gospel that we have. And then, based on what Gospel was picked, they would pick an Old Testament reading that had a similar theme to it. So that over the course of 3 years, we don't get all the Old Testament, but we hear from every book of the Old Testament and most of the main passage of the Old Testament. And then there's a second, so the first reading and the Gospel always go hand in hand. And then in the second reading, the Church says, oh, well, we want to get all these other New Testament readings in. So the Church then goes through the rest of the New Testament, other than Gospels, and puts them in as a second reading over that 3-year cycle.
Alright, now we're going to ask you some questions.
Yes, great.
Okay, why isn't the second reading included in school masses?
Great question. The Church makes the distinction between Sundays and major feast days, and then regular weekdays. So you're at church on a regular weekday. So on a regular weekday, there's only 2 readings. There's the Gospel and then the first reading. It just has to do with how important the day is. So Sunday is like the most important day to be at church. During the week, it's great to be at church for Mass, but it's not as important, so the Church only has the 2 readings.
How do you prepare for a homily?
Oh, okay. I didn't know I was going to get asked that question. Well, basically, I sort of like what I said, because the Church started how they put it together. They start with the Gospel. So I start with the Gospel. I then read the Gospel through several times, and I start taking little notes, and maybe I'll circle some phrases or some words, or I'll say question mark, or I'll be thinking about the Gospel. Then after I've done that a while, I'll go to the first reading, which is, remember, the theme of the first reading is always the same as the Gospel. So I'll go to the first reading and see kind of how it connects to the theme of the Gospel, and then try to be thinking of how does that apply to people's lives. And then I'll go to the second reading, which might or might not fit, but sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and just to see if there's something there in the second reading. So that's what I do first. Then I put it aside. Maybe a little bit later, I'll then look at it again, and then if hopefully by then I'm inspired to kind of put together kind of what my thoughts, and so I can kind of know, step 1, 2, 3, 4. If I'm not inspired, then I go to what they call commentaries. These are books that people write about the Gospel, and they kind of help you get into the meaning of the Gospel more. And so I'll go to some of the commentaries and see if that'll inspire me.
Yeah, and I also really like the fact that you it's a little bit of improv.
Yeah.
How you just come with it, from the spot.
Yeah. So I do actually. It's less improv than you realize, but I know what you mean, because different priests do it differently. But I found that if I had to have it all written down, and then I kind of try to speak from my heart by reading it, it doesn't come across as energetically. So I find it better to have it sort of in my head, exactly what I want to say, but with enough improv, so that I can kind of I can emphasize different things. Yeah.
Okay, what is the profession of faith, and why don't we do it during school masses?
Okay, again, the profession of faith is part of the Liturgy of the Word, as is the prayers of the faithful. I don't know if you're going to ask a question about that, the intercessions, but the Liturgy of the Word ends with the profession of faith, followed by what we call the universal bidding prayers, or the prayers of the faithful. So the profession of faith is so that the whole community once a week reaffirms the core faith we have together that unites us as Christians across the entire world. And so that faith goes back to the earliest church, it goes back to the councils of the early church, and it's a faith that unites us with all other Christians around the world. And so we do that once a week on a Sunday again, or major feast days. So again, because you come to church as a school, On weekdays, we don't do the profession of faith on
Oh,
weekdays.
okay. So you already talked about like the readings and stuff. Can you talk about more about the cycle of the readings?
Yes, so a 3-year cycle,
Mm-hmm.
and the church says year A, B, and C. Right now we're in year A, and then the Gospel of Matthew is especially big for year A for most of the year. But then during Lent we insert some of John's Gospel, and then the rest of the year we'll stay with Matthew. Year B we do Mark's Gospel, but then during the summer we insert some more of John's Gospel. Then year C we do Luke's Gospel. And during the Easter season, of all 3 years, we insert some more of John's Gospel, so that John's Gospel gets inserted throughout those 3 years, but each of the other years has a major Gospel focus. Year A, Matthew; year B, Mark; year C, Luke. And so it's a 3-year cycle that, like I said, allows you to know that you've been in contact with all the major passages of the Gospels during those 3 years. Weekday readings are on a 2-year cycle. So the church then takes the Gospels, and because there's more weekdays than Sundays, right? So you can kind of go through it a little bit in the course of the year. So over 2 years, you get all the major Gospels and all the New Testament and Old Testament readings on a 2-year cycle.
Okay.
Now, if you're willing to, could we go to church to show you kind of where we do it, so you can kind of get those pictures too?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, good. Let's go.
I've never really been this close to the sanctuary.
Me
Okay.
too.
It's good to be here. Good to be here with you. So, any question about anything here?
Yeah. So why do we do the readings from the ambo?
Okay, this is the ambo. Good question again. So, sometimes called a pulpit, or in secular terms a lectern, but we call it ambo. That comes from a Greek word, by the way. Have you ever heard the word walking, ambulatory? So it comes from the word walking. Well, beneath that is a set of stepping up. So the idea was that they had these places where you'd step up to and then read and proclaim the reading. So it got to be called an ambo. And that's how we got the word. So from the ambo, the lector, that's the name for the reader, right, will have the first reading, and they'll proclaim the first reading. They'll have a seat, and then a cantor, a singer, will lead us in one of the psalms called the responsorial psalm, because that's actually part of the liturgy of the word too, because that comes from the Bible. So then we'll sing the psalm, or they'll help lead us sing the psalm. Then the second lector will come up, and then I'm thinking of a Sunday particularly, will then proclaim the second reading from the ambo, and then they'll have a seat, and then we get led in what's called the Alleluia, or gospel acclamation, and that's always a little verse from the gospel. And then the priest or deacon will come to the ambo and proclaim the gospel from the book of Gospels.
Okay.
Why is the book of Gospels here?
Right. So it's interesting, isn't it, that it's called the book of the Gospels. It's not called the book of readings or just the Bible, but it's the Gospels that are used at the Mass. And so that's saying that the church sees the Gospels, which are the stories of Jesus' life, as the most important part of the liturgy of the Word. So to emphasize that the Gospels are the most important part of the liturgy of the Word, the church puts the Gospel readings for Sunday together in the book of Gospels and puts it on the altar, so that there can be a procession with the book of Gospels from the altar to the ambo. It's just a way, it's kind of a fancy way to say, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Remember, I think you have seen where candles will lead the Gospel, and it's just a way to kind of say, pay attention, this is the most important thing. And so it's just a way to highlight that if you're going to pay attention to anything, please pay attention to the Gospels.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's good, again, to see it. You're doing such a good job with the mashup. Thank you. Good.
Reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Hear me, O islands. Listen, O distant peoples. I will praise your name, my King and my God. Honor to you, O Lord Jesus.
The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
So one of the ways in which we can enter into Holy Week, and we did on Palm Sunday, is to reflect and think about that last day of Jesus' life.
For the Holy Catholic Church throughout the world, for Pope Francis, Archbishop Bertrand, and for all ministers of the gospel who pray to the Lord.
Lord, hear our prayer.
And we're back.
So, the Liturgy of the Word has so many parts, and half of them I didn't even know.
And that's all we have for you.
Next time, we're going to be learning about the Liturgy of the Eucharist.
So stay tuned.
Bye!